If you're not hyped for this year's CrossFit Games, get hyped.
Yeah, I'm watching the rise, and I wouldn't say I'm shocked because I'm hardly surprised. This one's for the ride, this one's for who knew I'd make it, just needed some time. This one's for my wife, could've left 1,000 times just about my side. This one's for the grind, I knew it would happen, just had the strength in my mind.
So we have some new CrossFit polling, and I actually got to be a part of it. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what Barbell Spin put out with some analyst polling, and Brian Spin reached out to me and asked me to be a part of this poll that he said was going to be like the AP poll that they have for college basketball and college football. And I was really excited about it. The difference between this type of poll, where you have analysts deciding who's in the top 25 versus using just a performance metric like the metrics that CrossFit is putting out now, is that it accounts for the eye test, how people are looking this year, what we saw at semifinals, where when you look at CrossFit's rankings, Mal O'Brien is still ranked in it because she still has enough points to be highly ranked in it, and she competed at the beginning of the season. We don't have Mal in our rankings because she's not gonna be at the games. She doesn't need to be taking up a part of the rankings. She's not gonna be there. So it allows us to have influence based on what is actually happening now and not just past events and a number that's given for getting a certain position in those events. That person can be performing very differently this year, and those numbers in some ways can be misleading. I think these are fun because it just can be influenced by so many things. So he had 12 people throughout the CrossFit space that participated in these rankings, including me, and really, like, I was honored to be asked. I love AP rankings. I check the top 25 polls, especially for college basketball, every week. So getting to be a part of something similar was just, I mean, it was really cool. So I mentioned that I was part of this media poll, but I figured I'll just tell you who all the people are. So there are 12 media personalities and analysts who have submitted their ballot for the first poll. Those include Brian Spin, John Young, Tyler Watkins, Sivan Matosian, Andrew Hiller, Chase Ingram, Peter CPW, Amanda Harry, that's me, Barclay Dale, Chad Schroeder, Sarah Beth Jumper, and Derek Brown. So additional voters could be added in the future. And something that I think is pretty cool is anyone can sign up for the Patreon, and then there becomes a fan vote. So that's an aggregate poll of all of the fan submissions for top 25s. If you become a Patreon member, you can be a part of that. And your poll, the fan poll, goes up right against the media poll. And the media poll, you don't see any of our individual ballots. It's an aggregation of all of our ballots. And so it's basically just all of them combined and put together to make a new poll that shows essentially the median of all of our votes. So it's pretty cool, and we'll see how accurate it becomes. And it might even be cooler in the future. And what I mean by that is, right now this is the top 25, and really only 40 people are involved in it because it's top 25 going into the CrossFit Games. It's only out of the 40 people who will be there. We're not ranking people like Tia, who's out this year because she just gave birth. We're not ranking people like Mal, who decided not to compete this year. Haley Adams, those people aren't in it. But after the games is over, we're gonna redo this poll, and then we're gonna have all the people in it. So people that didn't make it, Brooke Wells, Danny Spiegel, all those people, Saxon Panchek, they're gonna be back into this poll, which will make it even more exciting because when you only have 40, you're only really leaving off 15. There's gonna be a lot more names that are going to be in others receiving votes. There will likely be even more people receiving #1 votes. So that's gonna be exciting. That's something to look out for after the game, something to be excited about post games, because, you know, it's sort of sad time post games, you know, a lot less CrossFit news, but we will have a new poll. So there is something to look forward to after the beginning of August in the CrossFit space, which is also cool. So these rankings will be updated every month. I believe Brian said there's a chance they could be updated a little bit more often at certain times of the year, but that's a general timeline for when you'll be seeing a new poll. In college basketball and college football, it's weekly, but during the season, they have a lot more games than the CrossFit athletes have competitions. So we'll start out with the men's poll. And in first place, we have Justin Medeiros, the current champ, two-time champ, and he is going into the games as the front runner. I would say he's the front runner in everyone's books. He's the front runner in the CrossFit rankings that are out based on past performances. He's the front runner in the media poll. If we take a look at the fan poll, which we will too, he is also the front runner there. So Justin Medeiros, front runner. And he's an interesting front runner because he came in 5th at his semifinal. But I think most of us are just assuming that was more of a fluke. And it's hard to count out the current champ until you see them suffer or fail on the biggest stage, because you don't need to be peaking for semifinals. Back in the day, Matt Fraser, Rich Froning, while they often won their semifinals or regionals because they were just so good, they weren't peaking for it. They didn't always win the Open. That just wasn't their goal in the season. So maybe Justin Medeiros has been focused so much on the games that his training, he was not at all in any sort of peak for semis. Sometimes some athletes do like a mini peak just to make sure they make it to the games. And all you have to do is make it to the games. He made it to the games. That's what he needed to do at semis. He's there. He's going to get to compete. And he also is an athlete that we usually see do well as we get farther into the weekend. He's not always the person wearing the leader jersey on day one. He wasn't last year. We saw Ricky come out really strong, but by the end, Justin was on the top of the podium. So semifinals, shorter event. I don't think it works as well for an athlete like Justin. I think we'll see him do well with more events. But I do think he might be the most vulnerable he's been since he popped onto the scene. First year at the games was 2020. He still finished on the podium in that very, very weird top 5 competition at Aromas. And he's been a podium contender every year. Of course, he's a podium contender this year, but I do really feel that this is one of the years that we have the most opportunity for a new male to end up on the top of the podium. So he received 7 of the votes from the 12 media people. I will tell you, while I'm not gonna put my poll up individually, that I was one of the 7 people that voted for Justin Medeiros. Well, I think it's fun sometimes to throw out some random people and to sometimes make some controversial picks. And maybe I'll do a picks for YouTube and maybe I'll be a little bit more controversial in those. For this, it's a media poll. I want it to be as accurate as it possibly could be. I don't want to make crazy picks just to make crazy picks and influence the poll negatively. So I do feel that Justin Medeiros is the front runner. I do feel he's by far the most likely to win the games. Well, I feel that he is not as likely as Matt Fraser was most of his years, as Rich Froning was most of his years competing. I still feel like he's ahead of the rest of the field. I personally think it's always really exciting when new people contend for the top of the podium or for the podium. So I wouldn't mind seeing someone take Justin down. It's not personal, of course. It just would be fun. But I have to make my picks based on what I think is going to happen, and that way you get the most accurate read of what we think going into the games, not just some crazy opinions.
I know I'm capable of more, and I think that's just really hard when the leaderboard doesn't reflect that. So I think just coming in today, the plan was to have a smooth run and let my fitness kind of show it for itself.
Number 2, Pat Vellner. And well, Pat Vellner is getting older, and I think at times we look at him and think, has he already peaked? And Pat is certainly on the back half of his career. I do think he's looking really, really great this year, and I think he knows he doesn't have many years left. Justin is very young. Justin could have 10 more years in this sport, literally, competing in the open division. Pat doesn't have that. Pat knows that if he wants to win, this year could be a great opportunity. And he looked very, very good at semifinals, coming in first. I would keep my eye on Pat to make another podium appearance. I had him on my podium. And could be interesting. He could push, possibly, for that win. And I think so many people would be here for that. And he looks very good this year. So keep your eye on Pat Vellner after the swim event, because he'll probably tank that. He always does. So don't even count that. Luckily, there's like usually 15, 16 tests at the CrossFit Games. So probably won't win the swim. But if he comes in middle of the pack or even top third, that is a great finish for Pat. Watch out. And in third, we have Jeff Adler, who won his semifinal in North America East, possibly the most competitive men's semifinal. He looked pretty dominant all weekend. I do think for Jeff, the semifinals format has been very good for him in the past, was very good for him this year. I don't think he's likely to win the games. He didn't receive any votes for first place from the media. I think that makes sense, but I feel like he's a good podium contender and certainly a top 10 athlete. Obviously, he was in the top 3 for the media poll. He's just missing something to make me feel like he's going to win the games. Obviously, he's missing something to make other people feel like he's going to win the games. But podium, I think Jeff Adler has a great chance of making it back there. And we're not gonna go over this entire top 25, but I will link it below if you wanna check out the full list. And you've seen it up on your screen to get an idea of what it is, but definitely go over to the Barbell Spin and check out the full thing yourself. But in fourth, we have Roman Krennikov, and I wanna bring him up because he was on the podium last year. It was his first time competing at the CrossFit Games in person after having visa issues. He's now living in the US, came over from Russia, living here full time, so he will be at the Games. He even competed at semifinals here. And I think his appearance at semifinals has some impact on where people are putting him here. He finished 4th in semifinals, and I think he just underperformed what everyone was expecting after last year's games. Now, could be like a Justin Medeiros type thing, just not peaking for this. And I do think Roman, like Justin, will do better with more events, different than Jeff Adler, who I think is very well built for the semifinals format. I think people like Justin and Roman are better fit for the games format, more unknowns, more events, have to sustain over a longer period of time. So I do feel very confident that Roman's gonna be a top 10 athlete, and I do think he has a chance of ending up on the podium. I believed he had a chance of winning the games. He didn't look great at semifinals, so that sort of took him off of my top position, and I just can't count Justin out. But I wouldn't be shocked to see Roman still battling for the top of the podium. He's training over at Cookeville with Mayhem. I wouldn't count him out. He may be 4th in the polling, but he may be a podium athlete, and he may push Justin. The whole field may push Justin. This is gonna be a fun year on the men's side and the women's side, actually. If you're not hyped for this year's CrossFit Games, get hyped, because we're like a month away, and it's looking good. This is just a vulnerable field all around. This could be a very interesting podium. While it could end up just like our picks, this is one of those years where I wouldn't be shocked to just throw a wrench into everything and, come out with some really interesting people. And this is only Adrian Bosman's 2nd year programming the games, 1st year programming the whole season. We could have some surprises even with what we see at the games, which I think made it a little bit more difficult to make these picks, just not knowing nearly as much as we did in the Dave Castro era, because the Dave Castro era lasted so long. Although, is it the Dave Castro era again? I don't know. He is back as the head of sport. I made a video on that. I'll probably link that up here somewhere so you can check it out. But he is actually now a part of CrossFit Sport again. So is it the Dave Castro era again? Should we be factoring that into our opinions? I don't know. Now I'm just thinking about that. Some other interesting things on the list. We have Brent Fikowski in 7th, BKG in 10th, and he has been very consistently in the top 10, so I don't think it's crazy to keep him there. Even though he didn't have a great performance at the East semifinal, finishing 8th, I do think he will look better at the games than he looked there. Noah Olson in 12th, making his 10th CrossFit Games appearance. Cole Sager, also 10th Games appearance, 15th. Colton Mertens in 22nd, crowd favorite. And in 25th, we have James Sprague as a rookie, rounding out the list. So now, moving over to the women's side of the leaderboard, and in first, we have Laura Horvath. She is first in CrossFit's rankings as well. She is the only female podium athlete from the 2022 games that is going to be at the 2023 games. I said Tia had a baby, Mal decided not to compete, so it's easy to say Laura is expected to be the next woman up. Now, she finished 3rd in the Europe semifinal, but I believe if you look at the aggregated data of all of the semifinals, that Europe was actually the most competitive, and that kind of makes sense. They went last, they had the most experience practicing the events and seeing them executed. But the women in Europe, the top 3 there, all women that I think have a chance at the podium at the games. So 3rd in that field is not very bad. Also, Laura is certainly a second half of the competition, back end of the competition athlete. Final day of the games in 2022, she made her push to get on the podium. She wasn't there going into the day, and she managed to get into 3rd by the end of it. This year, at semifinals, final day, she made her push to get on the podium again. So more events benefits Laura. Games, lots of events, many more events than semifinals. I think, like some of the other athletes we talked about, Justin and Roman, the games format is better for her, more unknown and unknowable, more ability to use her different skill sets that she has from other sports, like rock climbing. I wouldn't anticipate seeing Laura wearing the leader jersey on day 1. I would almost count that out. But the event's long, 4 or 5 days, 15 different tests. At the end of it, she could be. And I was one of the 6 people who voted for her in first place. I just think that she has the experience, she's made the podium multiple times, and the fitness to get there. I think a lot of people get wrapped up in her weakness at parallel strict handstand push-ups, or just parallel handstand push-ups in general. That is a very, very specific handstand push-up. And if it's mixed in with enough amount of things that she can get a couple, it might not matter. Also, that specific handstand push-up may not come up. That's the truth. So unless that comes up and is the real crux of the event, high reps at that, I imagine she's worked on it to some degree to be able to get some. I think that she has enough strengths that one weakness is not going to hold her back from potentially winning the CrossFit Games. So Laura, podium athlete, I feel very strongly she's gonna be on the podium again this year and very possibly may win it. In second place on the media poll, we have Danielle Brandon. And Danielle has continued to do better at the games, finishing 4th last year, just outside of the podium. One of those positions you just forget about, right? Because you think about the top 3, you think about who stood up there, and 4th is just outside of that. It's not far enough down that you're like, man, they underperformed. It's just enough to forget. And she finished 2nd at her semifinal. Last year, she won her semifinal. This year is one of the few years that she's had consistent training all year. That could be a good or bad thing. I think she is someone who does well in chaos, and she has had chaos at the games the last couple years, 2021 being sort of isolated because she had been exposed to an illness and they were worried about her giving it to other people. And then in 2022, leaving her training camp Underdogs right before the games, chaos. She did well both of those years. So a year of more consistency could be great, could not be if she just doesn't do as well without having chaos. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see what Danielle Brandon looks like with a year of consistent training and stability. But I do think that she definitely is a podium contender. In third, we have Annie Thorsdottir, and Annie Thorsdottir has been at the CrossFit Games in 3 decades. Insane. She competed in the ranch era. She's won the games back in 2011 and 2012. People talk about her as a contender to win this games this year, and I think there's a possibility that she could win the CrossFit Games and certainly podium. So keep your eyes on Annie Thorsdottir. If she did, it's a storyline for the ages, winning for the first time in 2011, competing in a 3rd decade, and possibly winning again more than 10 years after her first win, and after having a baby. She looked great when she competed in 2021, making it back to the podium. She decided to go team last year. They had an injury on their team, underperformed what they were hoping. I think she's back with a vengeance. Keep your eyes on Annie. And she's just so sweet and even so impressed with herself sometimes, which I think we all are. Surprised with herself.
I honestly don't understand how I'm still here. I thought I could do this sport for like 3-4 years, and I always do it 1 year at a time, and somehow I'm still here, and sometimes I'm like, how?
Going down the list, a couple names to keep your eyes on. Emma Carey, she was out last year with a back injury after having a fantastic rookie season at 17. People have her in 4th. She won her semifinal. I would certainly keep my eyes on her to potentially make the podium as well. Emma Lawson, who was Rookie of the Year last year, didn't perform as well at semis as I think some people had expected, but again, you just gotta get to the games. I think the game's gonna be better for her. She even wore the leader jersey last year. That's how good she is. She's only 17, 18 now. I think we're gonna see big things from Emma Lawson in the future, and maybe as soon as this year. Gabby Magalo won that Europe semifinal, impressed the heck out of me. We haven't seen her break into that podium contention at the games yet. I think she will be in talks for the podium, and I do think there's a chance she makes it. She's made a lot of changes, now training under her boyfriend. She left the program, so I think it's going well for her, and I think that we hadn't seen what it was gonna look like with her training under Christoph Horvath, but it looked great at semis. We'll see how it translates to the games. 6th might be conservative for where Gabby's gonna finish. Alex Gazan making it to 7th after winning North America West. We have Alexis Raptis in 8th. Katrin Davidsdottir, 2-time game winner. She is in 11th. Bethany Flores, formerly Bethany Shadburn, making it back after being sick 1 year and having to be pulled from the games, and the next year having a back injury. So it'll be interesting to see her back. I spoke to her at semifinals, and she was just really excited to be there and shocked by how well she was doing. So exciting to see her make it back to the CrossFit Games.
Everything was questionable for me, and the whole weekend is honestly like I'm kind of just going into this weekend with a lot of unknowns and a lot of uncertainty, and we're just gonna see what happens, and you know what, just try to enjoy time out on the floor again. Not to get too sappy, but last year was really hard and I felt really burnt out and I almost quit CrossFit. And I think a lot of girls are actually experiencing that this year and maybe in the years past. So for me, it's way bigger than this competition for me. It's way bigger than these events, and honestly, I don't know how the rest of the weekend's gonna go. I haven't deadlifted since quarterfinals. I didn't even touch the sled at all before this whole event started. I did 1 pistol with the ruck on before this event started, 5 burpees with the ruck on before this event started. So there's just so many unknowns. So I'm just honestly just happy to be here. I feel like I'm a walking miracle right now, and I have to give the glory to God.
Another teen athlete who could have competed as a teen again this year, won one of the events at semis, impressed a lot of people. I'm interested to see how she does. I don't think she's gonna do as well as Emma Lawson did last year or Mal O'Brien the year before that, but she certainly has potential and is someone I think we'll be watching for years. So that wraps up the media poll. We'll take a quick look at the fan poll just to point out some of the differences. And you could vote in this if you want. I'm linking that Patreon to the bottom too. I just think it's a really cool thing. If college basketball had something like this, I would certainly be voting in it. So the big difference on the men's side for the fan poll is that instead of Jeff Adler in third, there is Roman Krennikov. I totally understand that viewpoint. If Roman had performed better at semifinals, I think he would have been third in the media as well. I just think everyone was a little bit surprised by what we saw from him at semifinals and adjusted their rankings for that. At least I know I did. And the biggest difference for the women's side is that instead of Danielle Brandon in second, they have Annie Thorsdottir in second. And I think I like that better. That, I think, is what I had. Actually, I think I had, well, I know I had Laura, Annie, Danielle. So I kind of agree with the fans here. I would put Annie in second, but very similar. These polls are pretty similar, especially at the top. Fourth, they also have Emma Carey. They have Gabby Magala up one spot in fifth instead of sixth, then Emma Lawson below her. And then the fans also have Katrin Davidsdottir up a little bit higher. I don't dislike that. She looks very good at semifinals, and she's a 2x games winner. Come on. All right. So if you want to take a look at this, I have everything linked below. I appreciate you watching. I'm very excited for this games. I think we have a lot of fun things happening here and a lot of surprises this year. So make sure to watch the CrossFit Games. I'll have more content previewing it coming up. Subscribe if you enjoyed this, like the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.